have been thinking a lot lately about my call to ministry in the last couple of months. And it's probably because a phase of my life is coming to an end, so it has me thinking about its beginnings. I don't know how familiar you are with the language of being called to ministry, but when I entered seminary, I sort of thought it was like God shouting out to Abraham to leave your home. Very straightforward. You know what you are called to, you know when you are called, and there's really not very much room for doubt. Here's what God or your conscience wants you to do, so go forth and do it. But I honestly just did not get it. I remember the first day of orientation at seminary, somebody asked me, "So when did you get the call?" And I was like, what, my acceptance letter? The concept was completely foreign to me. I made a calculated, rational decision that I would be happiest doing something that I was really passionate about, fixing religious conflict. I had absolutely no interest in being a minister. I admired it, but it was too emotional, not enough intellect. Clearly, I had not discovered you yet. Halfway through my first year, I was complaining to my boyfriend, Mick, when I started to feel a little baffled by my own career plan to do interfaith nonprofit work. I felt like I didn't have solid footing, a clear picture of my own spirituality. And the endeavor of looking for it was oddly appealing to me. And Mick stopped me and he said, "You know, I don't think you should discount looking into being ordained." I'd never heard him use so many qualifying words in a sentence. And Mick is not usually the tread lightly type. But I scoffed and shrugged it off. A couple months later, I was having another one of those conversations with him, worrying over my future as I want to do. And I repeated that I had no interest in being a minister. And Mick replied, "So you say." Turned out that Mick's remarks were really just the beginning. I found ministry calling me on a regular basis, and I had no intention of ever picking it up. A theology class captivating me, processing spiritual experiences with small groups of friends, listening to people's struggles and joys. The person who kept actually hearing the phone ring was Mick, and he was trying so hard to get me to pick up the phone because he saw something that I didn't see. He heard my call because he saw its potential. I did not, and when I did on rare occasion actually pick up the phone myself, it was a one-sided conversation. "Hello, I am trying to reach Ellie Kilpatrick. This is ministry." "Yes, I'll hold." Now I realize that since I had ministry on hold for a year, the line was busy, so I was missing all of my other calls. And I was treating my call to ministry like a telemarketer interrupting my dinner. But I've learned that ministry is never convenient. That's why we need a little help picking it up, or in my case, a step stool. I'm rather short, you see. It wasn't until after my first year at seminary, the summer, that I really got hit in the face with my call. I somehow ended up leading a spiritual group in a conflict resolution camp for youth who didn't feel like they fit into a clear Christian, Jewish, or Muslim category. We were the other group. So I worked with this group of theological misfits, ranging from atheist to pagan to Buddhist to interfaith, nature enthusiasts, you name it. And I helped them put together a worship service to explain their spiritual lives to the outside world, which was just utterly baffled. And we called ourselves the Believe It or Not group. And after the service, we continued to meet for spiritual discussions, for how we saw our diversity impacting social justice in the world. We covered a lot of topics. And instead of being drawn in by the things to fix, which at conflict resolution camp there were plenty of, instead I was just captivated by this group. I fell in love with every part of it. I left the experience wondering if I should start a Believe It or Not religion. And it just felt like we had created something so special. The message hit me. My personal spirituality was interfaith, but I engaged the world from a Believe It or Not perspective. For years, I had done interfaith work, and I didn't know the real reason that I did it. Not because there was something to fix. All this time, I was trying to evangelize a Believe It or Not mentality. Your faith is yours, my faith is mine, but our faith is learning how we live together and relishing the learning. I want a church that says that. That was the message that I had had on hold for a year. So how do I honor this call? Fortunately, before I went on the agonizingly long journey that is forming a new religion, I told a friend at seminary about my experience. And she politely suggested that I join her at church, Unitarian Society of New Haven. Home from the first moment I got my name tag. I remember feeling like it was tailor-made, the church, not the name tag. But the very first sermon I heard there was about my all-time favorite theologian, Spinoza. I think that was the first day I really started to believe in science. It solidified the message that I had already gotten from my Believe It or Not group. And thus, my ministry in Unitarian Universalism was born. My newfound love in our Believe It or Not religion. I learned that a call is never heard in a vacuum, and that most of the time we don't even know what we're being called to until our loved ones point it out. And I wonder if you've had any experiences like this where you've resisted the thing that your heart really wants to do. I stopped resisting. I found my calling, even if it didn't quite feel like a thunderous voice from above. Or so I thought. The plan was to be ordained as a UU minister and use that foundation in social justice to continue interfaith engagement. I couldn't ignore that I needed my own tradition, but I was still going to have my own path, and I was going to take the road less traveled. But I had a stepping block along the way, a congregational internship. I told my family and friends, Nick included, that I had no interest in being a parish minister. I certainly thought it had plenty to teach me. It would help me determine that path. But I had one certainty going in, and that was that congregational ministry was not going to be my final destination. Well, once more, my experiences started to leave me questioning, and I discovered that congregational ministry is actually something that makes my heart sing. The joy of it almost transcendent. I remember a particular service that forced me to think about it was our Christmas celebration last year. I am a tradition person, and breaking with tradition is really hard for me. But for the first time in memory, I was not in New York City with my parents and my brother, and more importantly, I was without our family friend who had just passed away that we spent every Christmas with. But in spite of all of that, when I led the service that day, I did not feel their absence. The opposite. I felt their presence, and I felt whole. And if that is not a call to ministry, I don't know what is. I'd love nothing more than to stand before you today and tell you my life plan after this. But then I would be missing the point, wouldn't I? The implication of these experiences is that my call is ongoing. That part of the call is really about calling me to keep my ministry doors open and relational. You see, it turns out that my call to ministry is more of a conversation. And the thunderous voice from above is actually the inner and outer circles of my life. The softer voices beside me that are shaping me to find a path that renews and transforms my spirit day in and day out. Because even a personal call is not a solo call. It reaches us in our core when it is heard by a whole community. That's when our call reaches its potential, because it isn't just ours. And that path that I wanted all to myself goes nowhere. But when paths converge, you have the start to something. I had an experience here about 6 weeks ago that was just a moment that you live for. I was preaching about General Assembly and the importance of bringing together our internal sermons, living them that resonate in our communities, bridging generational and spiritual differences in the future of UU. And I really wanted to have a congregational response to the sermon for people to sing, "We would be one." But not for the closing hymn. I wanted something more gradual and spiritual, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what. I decided it was a bit too much to coordinate, and I just had the song played after the sermon. But then something happened. A person started to hum along with the song, and then another person, and then another. And little by little, the hums became words until everyone in the congregation was singing an impromptu, "We would be one." Nothing I could have planned, even the most beautiful of displays, could have come close to comparing with the power of that moment for everyone in the room. Honestly, I had to work not to burst into tears at the time because we truly were one. The community manifested the vision that I'd had, but more importantly, it was a moment of utter unity that somehow every individual felt. In a moment where the call to unity didn't actually just come from me. It came from the community, speaking as one. I had only really heard part of the call before that moment, but you completed it. You heard the real call that I didn't even realize I sought. And then I got to share it with you. And I think it showed why our calls have to remain open, because no matter how much work and thought that you put into our call, the unexpected call is the one that really changes the direction of our path. I tried to close the door on my call at so many points. I wanted it just to be finished and decided. But the lesson that I've learned is that my call is never finished. The conversation goes on, converging with so many different paths along the way, as it does for you. We all have calls, right? Whether to ministry, to family, to friends, to community, justice. Listen, open, serve is a spiritual motto that I will be taking with me. Because it turns out that listening to our deepest selves is actually a lot harder than it sounds. You have helped me to do that. We've all resisted our calls at some point. Sometimes we are the last people to hear our call. But fortunately, that's why we have family to pick up the slack, who let us in on our calls. And that is one of the reasons why I know that you all have become my church family, because you have let me in on my call. And looking to my quest, the quest of my call so far, I realized that my Believe It or Not group was a congregation of sorts. Mick helped me hear my call, and Believe It or Not helped me live my call. And you need a community to live your call, right? Because in order to actually live a call or even a value, you need a group to interact with and to nourish it. But it became a covenant when you helped me hear and live continual transformation. The "we would be one" moment was only one example of so many times that you have reshaped me. That's what family does. They help you transform what you know about yourself, to let your lives transform you, especially the unexpected parts. And the opportunity that we have when congregational family helps us hear our call to life and we commit to listen and let our congregational family renew our spirit, is that it becomes a covenant to life. Because you rehear it every time you live it, it echoes in your heart, and the echo changes slightly every time, but it still resonates. Family helps you hear what you couldn't necessarily hear for yourself. I heard something new and lived something new, and that's why this call to ministry that I heard here has become a covenant to ministry. And we can all commit to having this evolving conversation, to make it a covenant. I am so grateful that every time I stood before you here, sat with you in Soul Matters groups, shared a social justice cause, I got to renew my covenant in the light that I am yours as you evolve and you are mine as I evolve. Our calls are joined in holy covenant. And though I will miss you more than words can say, when I walk out of this church and out of this internship, I am not leaving without you. Because the covenant between us will always exist, permanently written into the essence of my call, which will continue to evolve. But 30 years from now, I will still hear your echo. Family stays with you no matter where you go in life. Because every day I've been here, I have been renewed and transformed. Mick handed me the phone, but you sat me down and had that second conversation. You invited me to join you in your lives, and because of that, you will always be a part of mine. My covenant to ministry is relational. It's dynamic, and it seems to change with every new experience I have in ministry. And I think so it is with our call to life. Wherever it is, the call we hear is relational. It is fused with the calls to life of those around us. Just as I have been moved to a ministry that will always keep my time at UUCC in mind, so I hope to keep that openness to wherever I go. And living the value of simply being present to the world around me without necessarily trying to fix it. And in the spirit of being present, I just want to say a very special thank you to each and every one of you who have been such an extraordinary part of my life. You have meant the world to me, and this year would not be what it was. I would not be who I am without the support and the care and the love that I have gotten here. You have been such a big part of my personal and my professional formation. And because of that, I like to think that we will always be connected through our call to life. Because we've spent the last year with those calls overlapping and engaging in such wonderful ways. I am so privileged to have known you. Your call welcomed mine and made it a covenant. And I think our universal call to life blesses us with an outstretched hand that seeks to commit to continual transformation. Because I heard myself better in your presence. Connecting to you made me connect to myself. From call to covenant, you will always be my congregational family. So friends, I ask you today to make your call to life a covenant to life. A promise to renew and transform what you hear and what you do every day. To really and truly let this church family into the sacred space inside yourself. To find what makes you sing. If you can do that with me, we will always be family. growing and changing together, even if we are geographically apart. And I covenant this day to hear your voice beside me wherever the winds of ministry take me. Amen.
Where my free spirit onward leads, well, there shall be my way. By my own light illumined, I've journeyed night and day. My age a time-worn cloak I wear, as once I wore my youth. I celebrate life's mysteries, I celebrate death's truth. My family is not confined to mother, mate, and child, but it includes all creatures, be they tame or be they wild. My family upon this earth includes all living things, on land or in the ocean deep, or born aloft on wings. The ever-spinning universe, well, there shall be my home. I sing and spin within it, as through this life I roam. Eternity is hard to ken, and harder still is this. A human life, when truly seen, is briefer than a kiss. It's briefer than a kiss.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.